The days of the surgeon being, quote unquote, the king of the operating room should have long gone by. And what I mean by that is, sure, you're performing the surgery, but you can't do so unless you have a great scrub tech that anticipates. If you don't have a great operating room nurse who's making certain that you have everything that you need and the safety of the patient. And frankly, you have an anesthesia staff that's keeping the patient comfortable and safe.
Clock in, scrub up, and join us behind the red line. You're listening to First Case, a perioperative podcast bringing you exciting interviews, engaging discussions, and innovative solutions that are changing the way patients receive surgical care. Each episode, we talk to frontline staff, perioperative leadership, and nursing entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the back table to the boardroom, from wheels in to wheels out, we tackle the real-life issues affecting the OR. Whether you're tuning in for surgical service education or inspiration, we're glad you're here. And now it's time to roll back and start the first case.
We are kicking off this season around communication, speaking with Dr. Michael Redler today, Orthopedic Surgeon at Connecticut Orthopedics. And Melanie, you've done a nice job getting this season together. I'm excited. There's going to be so many great conversations, but the first one begins with a returning guest, a second-time appearance from Dr. Redler, and I think he not only sets a great example in this discussion, but he's got some tips that just about anybody can put to use, because at the end of the day, how we set a tone for communication has a lot to do with how our day-to-day is going to go, how well we work as a team, and ultimately how good the care is that we're delivering to the patients that are coming in for procedures.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest one is, how is that care that we are delivering to our patients? How are we caring for our patients? And then how, moving beyond that, how is our relationships with everyone else in the operating room affecting our day-to-day practice and then trickling over into the care that we give our patients? So I think we can look at all of communication from every angle that it comes at, from the different conversations we're going to have throughout this season. Is how is it going to affect the care that we give our patients? And I think Dr. Redler's really going to set the stage or set the table for that conversation. And I'm so excited that he agreed to come back and talk to us.
All right. Well, culture is queen and communication is key. That's what we're talking about today. We'll be right back with Dr. Michael Redler.
I'm Melanie Perry.
And I'm Justin Poulin.
A 17 Studios production, you're listening to First Case.
Today we have the pleasure of kicking off this season of First Case by speaking with Dr. Michael Redler, Orthopedic Surgeon at Connecticut Orthopedics. And this is not your first appearance on the First Case podcast. The last time we had you on, we talked a lot about your mission work, and I think we titled that episode Do Unto Others. So I want to point everybody in that direction if they didn't hear your first appearance, and I want to welcome you back to the show.
Well, Justin, it's great to be here. And, I always feel very honored to come around as a second-time guy on this fantastic podcast. And I'm looking forward to speaking with you this evening.
Well, we're going to be talking about communication in the operating room this whole season. And Melanie has put together a wonderful lineup of a number of guests, but you're going to get it all going and set the table with us today. And we're going to be talking about communication in the OR. But in case somebody missed your first appearance, can you talk about, your work over your career? And honestly, if you want to remind them of your mission work as well, because since you came on, I've heard Melanie may be joining you very shortly later this year. Who knows as it relates to when the podcast actually airs. She might have already gone by the time this episode releases. But if you want to just talk about your career and also the mission work that you do.
Justin, thanks. So I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I'm in Connecticut. I specialize in sports medicine and upper extremity surgery. I work with Connecticut Orthopedics. I'm a visiting assistant clinical professor of orthopedics, University of Virginia, though the pandemic has made that more challenging. I'm also a assistant clinical professor of orthopedics and medicine at the Frank Netter School of Medicine, Quinnipiac University. That's all great, but the most important thing I do, frankly, is taking care of patients. And that's patients here in Connecticut, but it's also patients in third world countries like Honduras. And as you stated, yeah, Melanie is going to join us. That is not until December. So if this doesn't get on before December, then your production time is impressively long. Nevertheless,
This will air before December. So we'll have to come back again, I think, and talk about our trip afterwards.
Totally need to have a special release for Melanie to talk about her experience. That would be great.
So medical mission work is one of my passions. Great patient care is one of my passions. Opioid sparing strategy is one of my passions. And it all fuels my drive to continue career in orthopedics and in medicine.
Yep. I think opioid sparing initiatives and efforts as well in medicine would be another great topic, Melanie. So scribble that down. Okay.
I've already been working on that topic too, because it is a fantastic topic to try to break apart and talk about from all the different areas. But we will get lost in that conversation today if we keep going. But it's good, and we're going to talk about it. Don't worry.
Great. So, Dr. Redler, as we set the table again, like I said, about communication in the OR, let's just talk about sort of how communication, just generally speaking, impacts how we work as teams in the operating room, like attitudes, efficiency, productivity, on both positive and negative, sides of that equation.
So it's an overused statement, Justin and Melanie, as you know, that, communication is the secret to happiness. But in the operating room and in the perioperative experience, it is so important. And I think that part of great communication starts with attitude. And what I mean by that, you have to come in, whether you're the surgeon, whether you're the circulating nurse, whether you're the scrub tech, whether you're one of the perioperative nurses, whether you're anesthesiologist, you've got to focus that you're an entire team. And if anybody thinks that one individual is more important than the other, then that's not going to lead to the best communication. So one of the first things I would stress with communication is the importance of the entire team. And when I say importance of the entire team, that means not only hearing from everybody, but having everybody feel comfortable speaking up as well. Our goal, obviously, is for great patient care, and that will happen most effectively if all members of the team feel comfortable being heard and have the great desire to speak up and further that patient care.
So I want to stand up and give you a standing ovation for that statement, because that is so true. And time again, we see nurses, scrub techs, other staff in the room. They're afraid to speak up. They're afraid to say something because the lines of communication, they don't feel they're safe. They don't feel that they are open. They don't feel that they have a voice or that what they say is valued. And patient safety is at risk every time we have an environment in our operating rooms where it's not safe. And so to have that foundation that everybody has a voice and everybody has value, and communication is definitely everybody in the game kind of thing, is huge. And I love that that's what you said, because that is so true.
The days of the surgeon being, quote unquote, the king of the operating room should have long gone by. And what I mean by that is, sure, you're performing the surgery, but you can't do so unless you have a great scrub tech that anticipates. If you don't have a great operating room nurse who's making certain that you have everything that you need and the safety of the patient. And frankly, you have an anesthesia staff that's keeping the patient comfortable and safe. And I would challenge any surgeon that if you think that it's all about you, try and scrub a case. Can you do it? Try and do what the perioperative nurse does. Can you do it? Can you be the OR nurse? Can you do it? Can you be the anesthesiologist? And we know the answer to all those questions is no. And as such, what you need to do is to realize the importance of every member of the team. And once you have that as your basic foundation, communication becomes a lot easier.
So, Dr. Redler, there's something about what you're talking about too that is like servant leadership, right? And you don't have to be in a managerial position or a position of authority or even a traditional sort of elevated status position to, exemplify servant leadership. It's really just helping everybody on the team thrive. And that's the first thing that occurred to me as you were sort of talking about how everybody has importance. But I almost wonder if you would take that another level further and say, how can we all also work together to make sure that we feel that importance? Not just that as individuals, we don't treat people differently. How can we improve that communication and help the others around us actually know their importance?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Justin. And I think one of the things as we go into the operating room for any given case, whether it's the routine case that you've done hundreds of times, whether it's a new procedure, don't ever assume that everybody is going to know what's going to go on, everything that you need, and every step that's going to be involved. And if you don't assume and you communicate ahead of time, and you talk to your staff, you talk to the scrub tech, you talk to the operating room nurse, you talk to anesthesia, frankly, and say, hey, this is what we're expecting. This is what the case is going to be. This is what we need. And you've communicated that ahead of time. One, you really have made the case more efficient. And in addition, you've also shown those members of your team how much you respect them because you're talking to them ahead of time. So one, don't assume. And the other thing is don't wait to the last minute to have that communication. Don't walk in and say, hey, where is this implant that we need? Well,
Yeah, exactly.
my office was supposed to let you know, and there's 1,001 excuses of why that doesn't work. But the reality is, if you want the case to go most efficiently, communicate ahead of time, show great respect for those who you work with. And here's what I think is the most important thing. Be unafraid and unashamed to take suggestions of how to do the case better from every single person of the team. And if every single person says, hey, how about if we try it this way? Wow, that's a great suggestion. And if you do that, you're going to lead to better patient care, you're going to lead to better outcomes, and you're going to have a team that, one, enjoys working together and enjoys getting the best possible outcome for the patient.
And stays focused on the mission as a result.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
If everybody has that voice to speak up, if everybody has the ability to make a suggestion of how to do things better, if there are no bad suggestions and there are no second-class citizens as a member of your team, you're going to get the best possible surgical outcome.
I love that. And I really hope I get to circulate your cases in Honduras because, I'm sold.
You will.
But what you're saying, all of these things I can think of at least 2 or 3 examples off the top of my head that are the exact opposite of everything you've said that I've experienced in my own career. And one of the things that really comes to mind for me when it comes to communicating needs for cases and, the office was supposed to let y'all know, or my scheduler was supposed to tell you, it has to do with those case postings. And we can have information posted in our cases or information that's supposed to come over so that we get that information from the office, but it doesn't always come over. What is a good idea or suggestion for making sure that we do get that information in a timely manner and making sure that cases get posted correctly so we can have what you need?
Yeah, Melanie, that's a great suggestion. And especially in orthopedics, a lot of what we do now is so inherently complicated, frankly, in terms of the implants, in terms of the vendor we're going to use. And the other problem is because of that, when you submit a case and it may be generated via your electronic medical record, it may be very generic. It may be terms that really don't quite apply because it's what's in the system. And so the chance of confusion is tremendous. And there's nothing worse than getting ready to start a case and, we don't have that implant in there. So I think that part of communication in this situation, frankly, is redundancy. And what I mean by that is when I talk to the patient of what we're going to do, I will talk to my scheduling coordinator, who's been with me for so many years and is absolutely fantastic in terms of communicating with the operating room what we need, communicating with the reps for a specific company what we need, and communicating with the surgical center of what we'll need as well. But then the surgical center probably will call and talk to the rep as well to confirm that. And with a lot of these reps for the companies, and I work with some absolutely fantastic reps, I will also text them myself. Hey, we're going to be doing this ACL reconstruction next week. I'm going to want to augment it with BioBrace. Can we make certain that we have that there? And it may seem like that you're doing the same thing over and over again, but you know what? We're going to have what we need. There are going to be no surprises. There's going to be a much lower level of anxiety because we have everything we need. And you know what? It's going to go more smoothly because no one's on edge and go, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Where is it? You don't have someone searching in central supply looking for certain implants. And it's because you've essentially communicated multiple times to make certain that everything is there that you need.
Yeah, that is almost exactly what I did as the orthopedic team leader at the facility where I recently worked. And that redundancy, it did feel very redundant, but at the same time, we had what we needed. And I made sure that we had what we needed because, like you said, as the surgeon, you were having your scheduler and you were telling your scheduler to post cases a certain way. You were reaching out to the rep, but I was also reaching out to those reps. And I had a great relationship with our orthopedic reps, and I was sending them a schedule twice a day for the day before. So they saw it in the morning, they saw the final posting in the afternoon. But there were a few times that I sent a schedule out in the morning and the rep was like, I didn't know about this case. I had no idea. Thank you so much. So while it might feel redundant, it made sure we were ready and it saved the day more than once. And it also made sure that reps were communicated with and everybody was on the same page with what we had. So that taking the extra step and making sure everyone knows what's going on really does affect our efficiency, make us more productive, and it just makes things run smoother and saves a lot of stress. So I'm all about communicating.
You know, it's interesting because, there's this whole big thing. Do you need reps in the OR? And to me, that question shows tremendous amount of disrespect. And I've got to tell you, I work with some absolutely fantastic reps who are always another set of eyes on a case, perhaps another suggestion. Just we said, it's communication is part of the whole team. And I think that their ability to pay attention, to know what's going on, to make suggestion, and to make the case go more smoothly, and to make certain you have the equipment that you need is imperative. And when we talk about the team, they are a part of the team truly and shouldn't be ever left out.
No, I agree. They're a valuable asset. 100%. I have seen rooms where we had too many in at one time, but that's another conversation for another day. But the reps that really knew their product, they knew the procedure, they had the experience, they saved my tail time and time again because of their knowledge. And so they can't be discredited as being a valuable team member for sure.
Okay, so we talked about having, positive communication. Even there's some over communication. I'm glad we brought the vendors into the conversation as well, because, it's not just the team in the OR. I mean, granted, they're part of that team when they're there, but it's not just the direct hire staff. It is everybody that's involved in the procedure that will ultimately influence the outcome of patient care. And I like how very detailed you got in terms of, communicating with the vendors, but let's transition back to the staff that are going to be in the room participating in the case and ways to communicate with each other, like some other tips. So Melanie, you said, you sent over the case postings in the morning and at night. What are some other best practices, maybe starting with your perspective, Dr. Redler, as the surgeon? What kind of things do you want to hear from the scrub tech, from the circulating nurse, et cetera, that really just help you do your job to its best? And maybe we can get really detailed on this.
Absolutely. And that's a great question, because I think that our team is involved with the case before the case ever starts. I will sometimes get texts from the scrub tech. I'll get texts from the circulating nurse. Hey, you're doing this case tomorrow. Is this all arthroscopic, or is there an open portion of the case? So they've anticipated ahead of time. We will discuss that case ahead of time. We will discuss what our goals are I will actually discuss the rationale for why we're going to do what we're going to do. Because if you understand the flow of what we're planning to do, then everybody's on the same page. And then when you're in the case itself, what you need to be doing is doing the portion of the case that you're doing, but also letting the whole team know what comes next. Verbalize it. Okay. The next thing I'm going to need is the espresso suture passer because we're going to start to repair this rotator cuff. We're going to need this anchor ready. We're going to need that down the line. And so there's no surprise and there's no standing there tapping your foot saying, where is this piece of equipment and that? Because you're doing what the part of the case you're doing, but you're letting them know what comes next. And that lets them know, one, that you appreciate them, and two, letting them be a step ahead. And when they're a step ahead, this case is going to go more efficiently. And the other thing that happens with that is you then have a team who is involved in the case. They're not just handing instruments. They're not just charting medications, but they're anticipating. And the true sign of a great surgical team is anticipation. They're not just going through the steps that you're working on now. They're anticipating the next step. And when you get a team that anticipates, it's like gold. You've reached that utopia. And that utopia is what's going to lead to great surgical results. It's going to lead for a happy surgical team, and it's going to lead to a great outcome for the patient.
You're in the zone, right? Like that's,
yeah.
You're in the zone as a team, not as an individual, but as a team. And that's how you win championships. If you want to, I know you like sports, Dr. Redler, so I thought I would throw that in there, but
that's right.
All right. So let's talk about when we're not in the zone and the appropriate ways to deal with conflict, especially mid-procedure. So maybe there was a miscommunication. It's clear somebody's upset about the miscommunication. And in my opinion, it doesn't matter who, right? We talked about deconstructing the hierarchy. So what is kind of the appropriate way to handle a miscommunication? You're not on the same page. Potentially, it's going to have an impact on the patient. Right. So now you're causing, you may be calling a little bit of an audible or trying to figure your way out of a situation at the same time that there's inherent conflict going on. And somebody may not even feel like what is their responsibility was their responsibility. What are the best ways to deal with that when obviously the patient should still be the focus of the situation?
Yeah. Justin, that's so important. And it's so important because we know in any given surgical case, not everything is going to go perfectly as laid out. Despite the preoperative communication, despite the intraoperative communication, there are going to be curveballs. And I think sometimes the sign of a great surgical team is not just your ability to be able to do all the steps of a case, but to be able to handle the intraoperative decisions when things aren't going quite as well. And number one, it's like the old commercial from years ago on TV, never let them see you sweat. Okay? Don't raise your voice. Don't become impatient. And just say, hey, okay, this is what we need. This is not going exactly as we need. So we need to make a change in our direction here. And it's the same thing. It becomes important. If there's a curveball in the case and you have to change because everything's not going smoothly, every member of that surgical team should have the ability and the comfort to suggest how to right the ship. Okay. And that becomes tremendously important. And I think that if you're speaking in a calm voice and you say, okay, this is the curveball we've been dealt with, because there are curveballs all the time. And you have to just have that attitude. Okay, here are the cards we've been dealt. Let's make the adjustment and let's go from there. And Melanie, I'll throw it for you for one moment. Nothing teaches you better than that than when you do surgery in Honduras, where the equipment is pretty good, but there's a lot of curveballs. And
Sure.
your ability to be able to be a little bit like MacGyver and figure out how to get the job done is great. And, so you remain calm there. You remain calm here in the OR here. You take the input from every member of the team. You relax. maybe irrigate a little bit more while you're waiting for some equipment.
Yeah.
And you get the job done.
Right.
And then you feel you've overcome the hurdle, but you've overcome that hurdle as a team.
All right, one last piece to this from me on. So I'm going to keep throwing some curveballs on this because I'm going somewhere with this, but this is the end of where I'm going. This is the destination of what I'm trying to get to. We still we're focused on the patient. We're getting through the case. Everybody's chiming in, but there may still be conflict that has to be addressed, and that has to be set aside while you're finishing things up. The other thing that we know is from a business perspective, we're all this pressure to get to the next case and turn the room over. So stopping to debrief on that, may cause more delay, right? And the case might have been delayed inherently because of whatever came up. But at the same time, I think that there's a little bit of a downside to waiting until the end of the day and trying to pull everybody together then. So what's the best way to kind of pull the team together? Because it's also about keeping the team together. Like the longer it waits, or if you don't talk about it at all and the conflict lingers, that can sometimes fester and really create an ongoing issue with the team dynamic. And so what do you recommend there in terms of when and how to address? And is it always situational, or is there a best practice that you think is the way to go?
I think when things don't go as you would expect or as you anticipate, you need to point them out. But everything is always in the delivery. There's no reason to be inflammatory. There's no reason to ever raise your voice. Be direct, but don't be belittling and don't be critical. Say, hey, this is what we anticipated. This is how we thought it could go better. This is what we expected, and it didn't work out. And so what you have to do is in a non-confrontational way, point out the shortcomings if there have been some issues, and then take suggestions from everyone of how to make it better. That doesn't have to be a prolonged conversation. You can have a longer debriefing at the end of the day. But on the other hand, if you diffuse the situation by bringing it up, but in a non-inflammatory fashion, you've actually diffused the situation. You've had some effective communication in terms of how to correct the situation. And you know what? You're going to have a much more relaxed staff for your next case because it's not hanging over their head. Everything is all in the presentation. Don't belittle. Don't be disrespectful. Be direct. And you'll get good results in terms of that communication.
I think that applies not just to surgeons when they maybe have unexpected events that happen in their cases, but that 100% applies to anyone in the operating room when we have issues with each other, issues between a circulator and a scrub, between a scrub and a circulator, or even preceptors who are training new employees. All of us need to remember not to belittle each other, to be calm and to be respectful. I mean, yes, sometimes things happen and we have to address those issues, but there's a way to do it correctly, like you just beautifully outlined, and typically the ways that we screw it up and then get known for our inability to communicate within the operating room itself. So certainly great ideas and suggestions, not just for surgeons, but for the whole team.
It was funny. I had a nurse years ago because I don't believe I've ever actually raised my voice in the operating room because I think it's counterproductive. And this is actually the same tone of voice I'll use for the entire case. And she once said to me, I can tell when you get upset in the case. And I said, really? How? And it says, well, you start to tap your foot a little bit and you get more polite.
Okay, so if I only had to deal with somebody who was more polite when they were mad at me and not being yelled at or being called stupid, which I have had before, I will take more polite any day of the week. Wow.
By the way, that's like we always have what we call the money quote to kick off the episode. That's it.
I like it. Yeah, for sure. So one other thing actually that you brought to mind, it's really just an example of from my own experience, but talking about being in a calm voice and how being calm and speaking calmly diffuses situations. I can very, very clearly remember a particular case that I was in about 3 years ago. And it was actually not an orthopedic case, even though I was on the orthopedic service line. I had just gone in to help in a general case. And things went downhill as soon as that patient went to sleep. It was bad. We were doing a code, all this stuff. And, that's not in the OR. Running codes and things can get very hectic. They can get very loud and excited, and there's yelling, and it's crazy. And the anesthesiologist who was in there in charge of the code, he was as calm and cool and collected as you were speaking now. And he just, all right, now we're going to do this. And now we're going to do this. And now I need you to do that. But it was very direct. It was very in charge, but it was clear. It was calm, and it did not add to the stress of the situation. And that has stuck with me ever since that case, because as wild and crazy as that case was, everybody knew what they were doing, and it was clearly communicated what was going on. And he just did an excellent job directing that and communicating what we needed to do. And I was thinking back to that when you were talking about staying calm, and all the way back to Dr. Simmons leading this code several years ago. And it's so true how much better it affects the environment of the OR.
There is a book that was written many years ago that was felt to be somewhat of an off-color book. It was called The House of God. And it was written by a medical resident. And he talked about the rules of the house of God. And some of them are a little bit, if you're not in medicine, will felt to be a little bit off color in terms of the sort of truisms of medicine. But one of the things he used to always say, and it was talking about if you, say, went into a code, or some patient was trying actively to take a nosedive or die, or it was a code, he said, when you're going to go into that emergent situation, take your own pulse first. And what that means is if you're really excited and you're really worked up, you're going to affect the entire team that way. And so if you're calm and your pulse is at a normal rate, you're going to be much more effective in helping to navigate through the situation at hand. Take your own pulse first.
I love that. 100%. I love that.
Yeah, I really like that. Taking your own pulse, you need to check yourself before you check into an emergency. And I think that's just great advice. And honestly, that's great advice no matter what situation you're in. You could be in a personal setting, and if you're not cool, calm, and collected, and it's a tenuous environment, or you're trying to get your message across to somebody, you're going to be much more effective taking that approach. So, that's just great life advice too, Dr. Redler. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I'm glad that we had you back. And it sounds like right from the get-go, We've got plans for maybe many more, maybe a bonus episode and one on opioids too, and how to, limit the use of those and still be able to effectively manage pain. And so I'm really looking forward to our next conversation. You're a fantastic interview. You have great insights, and honestly, that is the money quote. Your demeanor, is really a big part of leadership in general. And so I just want to commend you on role modeling that for us today on the show too.
Well, I appreciate it. I think you guys are doing a fabulous job. I think that my final thought would be is that when you're in the operating room in any of those situations, there are two types of communication that you need to demonstrate. One is your verbal communication. It's what you say. But another is your nonverbal communication. It's your body language. It's your attitude. It's maybe even finding out what music your team wants to listen to and put that kind of music on. And that's what leads to great success in the OR and perhaps at life as well.
Excellent, Dr. Redler. Thank you so much for coming on again. All right. Once again, that was Dr. Michael Redler, orthopedic surgeon at Connecticut Orthopedics. And we're kicking off this season having a really great discussion around communication in the OR. And it makes me think of some of the earlier conversations that we had, actually one of our earliest, but Bully and Scrubs. I remember that episode. And this partners with that a little bit as we talked about the hierarchy and just appropriate communication. But I think what was really nice about this discussion today was simply the fact that when we are communicating well, when we are communicating respectfully, what can be achieved? What are the positives? And I love his whole demeanor. And even again, as we kicked off the episode and talked about that whole tapping his foot and just becoming more polite. If you've ever listened to somebody talk about de-escalation, that is the way you de-escalate. When somebody else is getting more and more, heightened, if you go the other way, you are much more likely to calm them down. And I think that's, really at the heart of why he would be more polite and stay calm is if something starts to go awry, everybody else in the room may be starting to feel that pressure. And so it's de-escalating people in just the way that he's carrying himself. And really anybody can impact the rest of the room, whether they're a surgeon or otherwise, with that strategy.
Yeah, I agree. And the way we treat each other, it doesn't matter what role we play in the OR, but respecting everyone that we work with, recognizing the value that they bring. And they bring a different set of skills and they bring a different point of view, maybe sometimes different suggestions, experience, but everybody has value and can provide skills and input. But I definitely think, going back to talking about the being calm and remaining calm, do you know how many times I've walked on eggshells in an operating room because I was afraid I was going to get yelled at? Or how terrifying it is to realize you don't have what you need and you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop because you know that a temper tantrum's coming. It sets off the tone of your day and your case and really does make it terrible. So for Dr. Redler, making that observation, being so aware of the fact that this doesn't help, this doesn't make my case go better. I can improve efficiency, improve our team if we stay calm, de-escalate those situations. And it really does make a huge difference, not only for the case to go better or go well, but also just for the mental health and functioning of the team in the room, for sure.
Yeah. And, you can't control other people, but you can role model positive behavior. So if you find yourself in that situation, to follow those same practices to just try to keep everybody else calm. If somebody in the room is not remaining calm, again, just will ultimately and hopefully help bring a more positive, environment to the situation. Because again, it's about the patient. So that's going to do it for this show. I do want to point everybody in the direction once again of our smartphone app. I just think it's the best way to listen to the show. And I'm going to be honest with you. It's on iPhone and Android, and you should download it. And while you're there, you should give us a rating and a review. But if you're listening on other podcast applications such as Apple, Amazon, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, whatever it is, we would still love it if you gave us a rating and a review on those platforms as well. And honestly, feedback for the show is really important to us. And the best way to give us that feedback and reach out to Melanie and myself is to send an email to info@firstcasemedia.com. But even better, become part of the conversation on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook. Find us there. If you really like this episode, find the post on social media and comment. Add your experiences that you've had, or maybe you've tried some of these strategies before and they've worked, but we definitely want to see comments and your insights and your feedback on the posts on social media where we could all have a collaborative discussion. So hopefully we will see you there. And on behalf of Melanie and myself, thank you for listening to this week's episode of First Case.